So, I'm gonna have a picture here that is from the drafts of this chapter of who I think is Katsuya. I've never really read Fist of the Seeker before, however, it seems like this character has an appearance in this chapter, and we'll talk about that with the review and breakdown as I go on to that. But for those that have read Fist of the Seeker, is this actually Katsuya? Because if it is, then hey, that might actually mean something for the future of Kengan Omega basically. Or it just might not mean anything really. But either way, let's dive into the chapter, and look, we are in the build-up stage to this fight. As I've said before, chapter 300, that's probably when we'll get the fight with Shen Wulong. Whatever the type of match it ends up being, that's where I expect it to start. And so we have the title of the new chapter, which is called Ohma's Request, which luckily this little plot and mystery ends up getting resolved in this chapter. And it starts off with Yamashita bringing some tea for Ohma. It seems like they're sitting in their office at this point, or at a restaurant. Actually, the fact that Yamashita is the one making tea does land more to the idea that this is his office or his actual house. Either way, Ohma is finally back, and they have their little small talk. You know, Yamashita's like, hey Ohma, you didn't say you were coming. He would have picked him up, and Ohma's like, hey look, it's fine, it is what it is. He knows that they're busy, because it's not that they just have to handle, you know, the regular Kengan Association stuff. I don't think the Kengan Association matches have stopped really at all. But as we'll later get into later on in the chapter, there's actually a lot of stuff going on between the negotiations and what is currently happening in the planet. So yeah, we get a confirmation that Koga and Ryuki, they have landed. They're in Japan, or they'll probably be coming over to Yamashita or the office pretty soon, because Akiyama has actually gone to pick both Koga and Ryuki up. And this is where we actually get a little bit more information on what the Kengan Association is kind of trying to deal with while handling negotiations with Shen Wulong, and it is actually figuring out where the nukes or bombs that death dealers have, where they're located specifically. Because as we know from the last chapter, Lohan did pull that trick of threatening Wulong and Yan using those bombs, and the worm also did the exact same thing with the Kengan Association. And so the Kengan Association needs to secure these weapons of mass destruction, right? And it seems like Rin is involved in this as well. But what's very interesting here is that this does give some room, because I don't think the Kengan Association alone will be able to find the weapons. What I think is more likely to happen is that the Kengan Association, thanks to what is happening between Wulong and Lohan, thanks to that entire fracturement, they get to play both sides here. At least I see that opportunity. Because on the one hand, Lohan wants Shen Wulong dead. The Kengan Association could always leverage that. But we also have the idea that the worm could also want to take down death dealers, or at least want to cripple the power of death dealers. And so I can also see the worm giving information to the Kengan Association so that the bombs are taken care of. And so yeah, it seems like the Kengan Association, thanks to that whole breakup situation, is gonna be able to benefit. At least I can see it in the future. But right now, that's a big priority for them. And so they're trying to find these weapons wherever death dealers have hid them. But we then have Ohma make a request to Yamashita. Now, we don't actually see what he says directly to Yamashita at this point in the chapter, but we get to see what he possibly requested for later on in the chapter. And when Yamashita hears this, he's a little bit surprised, because he even asks, like, what do you need those people for? So Ohma is making a little bit of an odd request, it seems here. But we then transition over to where Ohma, Ryuki, and Akiyama are, and it seems like they're at a restaurant eating something. And Akiyama, he asked like how Koga and Ryuki's training went, and Koga, he's pretty happy with the results. Again, as I've said, it was controversial when I released the video of Koga being S tier, but we have the exact same confidence that Koga has in his strength established in this chapter again. We saw it after he beat Yumigahama, but he even calls back to the Kengan Association's competition against Purgatory and how he didn't have any power back then, but things are different now. So, again, Koga saying things are different, and look, we're almost hitting 300 chapters here, things gotta be different. But Ryuki's like, hey look, there's still 6 months left, still some level up we can still do. And Koga, he's in, he's like, yeah, and they even have like that little handshake that they have. And so, establishing that Koga and Ryuki, they feel ready. But that's where that scene ends and we transition over. So you can see there's a lot of parts here. We're jumping to various different characters that I think might be the center of the fight between Shen Wulong and whoever he's gonna fight. We did have this happen in the last chapter where it showed, you know, it was Koga, Ryuki, Lohan, it showed Yan, it showed Shen Wulong, it showed Ohma. I forgot who else it showed. But yeah, we kind of catching up with what are probably going to be the front runners, and we transition over to Hong Kong, and that means we catching up with Lohan and Niko. Long story short, they found the lab, and the lab seems to be in a pretty roughed up warehouse, so Yan probably came up with the idea of putting it in a place where you don't expect to see such high level equipment in because he wants to hide where the lab is. But Lohan, he's in there, he's like, yo, Yan has no taste, but Yan is being a lot more practical here. At least I'm speaking in defense of Yan. I've become a Yan apologist. But yeah, Niko is there too, and there's this funny portion of the chapter where Niko's asking about the database. He's asking like, oh yeah, is this where the memories are, you know? Is this where the martial arts are, you know, Lohan? Are you gonna be able to beat him when you have this stuff? And you can kind of see, it's kind of funny because you can tell that he's tiptoeing around this fact. And eventually he just comes out with it because Lohan, he's answering his questions like, yeah, this is all it, yeah, this is that. And Niko's like, okay, bruh, are you gonna share this knowledge? You know, because aren't we like partners or something? Like, hey, help our brother out. You know, Setsuna nearly, you know, he nearly killed me. I probably need to level up my game, right? You know, my fans, they're gonna abandon me. They're gonna say I'm in the mud. They already say I'm in the mud. But yeah, Lohan allows Niko to learn the techniques as well. So Niko's gonna be getting a buff from this, obviously. But what I think is very interesting here is that Lohan's focus is gaining knowledge. Now I wonder how much practical practice of the techniques he's going to have, considering there seems to be a lot of data to go through. Because if all he's gaining is knowledge, that means physical stat wise, or at least, well, it does make sense because even Ohma is closer to Wulong's build. But yeah, it's gonna be very interesting where his only real upgrade is gonna be knowledge, unless like he practices. But even then, how much of a buff will this end up actually being for Lohan? And is what Shen Wulong said, is that gonna end up being true? Because what Wulong said is like, hey look, even if he manages to, you know, get all the techniques and master it, he would get very close, but he wouldn't be able to beat me. And that does also bring into question what Niko was saying. It was like, hey look, if you learn all this, can you actually beat him? Now, it could be that Lohan still has well, he probably does have a plan, right? Because he did say he's gonna play a bit dirty. But yeah, that's really about it when it comes to this portion of the chapter. We then cut to Rokushin Kaikan headquarters, and this is where we actually get to see the cameo of Katsuya, but we don't get to see his face, we only get to see his back. And Ohma, he sort of sees him and he says, hey, that guy's pretty strong as well. And it seems like the person Ohma is talking to, you know, kind of agrees. He's like, yeah, sure, he's our instructor. Of course he's a badass. Now, I've never read Fist of the Seeker, as I've said from the beginning of the video, but if the picture from the drafts that I've sent at the beginning of the video is Katsuya, or is probably Katsuya, that means that Sandrovich and Daro, like, it is a little bit of teasing, but it now brings into the, you know, into the, at least into reality, the idea that Katsuya might actually have a fight in the series, especially with what we get later on in this chapter, because that's going to be very important as well. Now, there are a few things that I find weird with this theory, especially things that I've heard about Katsuya. Again, please correct me. He doesn't like fighting underground or killing. That means that if we ever get to see him in a tournament, he will either not try to kill his opponent, or the rules of the tournament will be clean. So like Purgatory, you know, that type of setup. That might be what ends up happening with Katsuya here, especially if he has those type of restrictions. Now, who he fights, I heard he's pretty powerful, so he'd probably have to fight a top tier, or maybe just a low tier if it's like, let's say, the Annihilation Tournament 2, right? He ends up, you know, climbing up the ladder, right? I think the possibilities of seeing this character in an actual fight has increased drastically. Like, I remember some people talked about Katsuya back when Joji said, oh yeah, I can call someone who knows how to defeat the connector as long as you don't kill him. A lot of people thought that was Katsuya, turned out to be, you know, the connector himself. But now it's like, okay, yeah, we had Joji and Kureishi in the series, but we haven't seen them fight. They've been more or less lurking around there, which is very funny considering what we see later on in the chapter. But it didn't seem likely that we would see this character. But now, I think the floodgates are open at this point. But hey, the question you would probably have is, hey, look, what is Ohma doing in this place? Turns out he's there to meet a few people. A lot of Purgatory fighters here. When I say a lot, I mean 3. And Joji and Kureishi, which I've just talked about. They're clearly here to spar with Ohma, back to back, just like what he did with the wrestlers. Now, this is definitely going to be a lot harder, because yeah, they're all like top tier guys, right? It's not like with the wrestlers where no dunking on Jose, and I forgot his name, but he's the fat guy. I would say they're not on the same caliber as like these guys here. So yeah, Ohma has upped the difficulty of his training, and if we actually get Joji and Kureishi a fight, an actual fight, even if it's a sparring match, again, opening the floodgates to what is happening. But yeah, this is the request that Ohma had. That's why it was odd. That's why Yamashita was like, those people, because they're from Purgatory. I wonder why he picked them in particular. I can understand Toa, because Toa's there. He has a lot of redirection techniques, but he's really big. He's probably very strong. He was competing with Julius High Diff, right? I can understand why he's there. Ludong, that's an interesting pick. Nitoku is also very interesting because he's like a grappler. I don't know how good Ohma's grappling is. I don't think it's that great. But he was doing pretty good against Cosmo, so hey, maybe I'm just being stupid. But yeah, it's gonna be very interesting to see if we actually get this, right? How Ohma performs against, A tiers back to back. Maybe Joji and Kureishi, I've never actually seen them fight. They might be way higher than where I think they are. But yeah, that was the chapter. A lot actually happened, but technically speaking, we're still in the training and building up phase. But yeah, don't forget to like and sub, and until next time, take it easy.